So, random story time. I used to be an Overwatch fan, and during the start of that game, I found out that there was a character called Symmetra who had a unique quality of 2 separate ultimates, one of which being a teleporter and another being a shield generator. And she could actually choose which one of the 2 ultimates you wanted to use each time you popped it. Now, that's long since been removed, even before I got into that game, but I always found the idea of having 2 special weapons in one character really interesting. But why do this? Well, I think this idea works best with simple specials, options that tend to be easy to use and therefore can be a bit simplistic or lack depth. Now, there's definitely a need for specials like these, it's especially helpful for new players, but they also have a bit of a common trap, which is that these types of specials tend to either be really garbage or noob stompers. Okay, mainly both. Oftentimes, balancing the game is not just about the top end. While it gets by far the most discussion and attention, it's also important to make sure options aren't overtuned in low ranks, especially for things like multiplayer shooters. Something being overtuned lower down can trivialize the game, or even worse, bring people into higher ranks that they aren't ready for, since something being overtuned could force them to skip things they would naturally learn when progressing, putting them at a part where they're now stuck and have a hard time figuring out how to improve because they aren't at the spot they should be at previously. This tends to be the case for these types of specials. Oftentimes, developers will balance them trying to make them good at higher levels, where they end up being staggeringly broken in low ranks. This is exactly what happened with Splatoon 2's Splashdown, probably the poster child of this problem, and it's something I talked about in its own video that dropped right before Nintendo threw out a triple Splashdown rework into the game. I think they like trolling me sometimes. Anyway, that special, to put it simply, amazing at lower ranks. Good panic button that very easily secured kills. Once you got past a certain point though, it was just seen as a super easy kill that was very linear. The devs tried to fix this. They made it counter other specials and have less of a penalty upon death, but nothing really solved the overall problem that people could just shoot you down. Now in Splatoon 3, we have 2 sort of Splashdowns. Reef Slider and Triple Splashdown are 2 new reworks that use a lot of the same concept. Press the special stick, turn into a giant explosion. Reef Slider is a little bit better than Splatoon 2 Splashdown in concept because you can start it from further away and control where you explode. Gives it a little more depth and removes the problem that you're gonna die at the start of the special. Now you die at the end of it, unless you're using tactical or QSJ buffering, because yeah, 20 frame jump out is broken, but that's besides the point of this video. Anyway, like I said, similar problem. It's easy to punish. So this got balanced out by making the explosion gigantic and paint a ton. It is just big overtuned number go burr. There's nothing special about it. And it's just not fun. The hitbox feels ridiculous with how far it can hit you, which just isn't fun to deal with. The special will either fail miserably or work far better than it has any right to be, and neither end of the spectrum is really great for the game. The special is certainly good at higher levels of play, that's far better than Splashdown ever got, but I don't think that's worth it if nobody at that level enjoys seeing it. Now, Triple Splashdown, on the other hand, gives a more creative solution that I personally like a lot more. In this case, it's the same as Splashdown, except you also get to summon 2 fists alongside it. Those take a little bit longer to deploy, but you can use it as a cool way to line up the special in more areas, try to hit over ledges, or generally use it in a place that's a little bit more safe. The user's still at risk of dying, but because they have this tool to work around, they can get a lot more creative with how they use the special. This one is okay at higher levels of play after some buffs. It does maintain some cool and creative lineups, but the complaints here mostly stem lower down. The counterplay side is really rough. Knowing what target to shoot down and doing it quickly is already hard, but oftentimes you now need to do that with one of 3 targets you have to pick between, and then avoid the other 2/3 of the special. In most ranks, this counterplay feels like it's not rewarded enough. We kind of have the opposite problem now. Killing the user is something that should be really satisfying. It's probably the only good part of Splatoon 2 Splashdown, is that's really fun to do. And in Splatoon 3, it's kind of silly how it can be better to die in the special. Now both of these have the same issue. It's really hard to balance them for higher level play without really just overtuning them in general. For Slider, this already happened. It's a good special, but it's kind of silly. For Triple Splashdown, it can still struggle at higher levels while already being way too good lower down. The devs try to balance around this to some extent. Slider got some reduced pain for more damage, and Triple Splashdown had a radius reduction specifically for balancing at lower levels. That's the devs' notes themselves. But on their own, it feels kind of difficult to make both ends of the spectrum satisfied here. So let's go back to the concept for this video. What could we do if we made them one special? Let's start first with activation, since that's the easy part. If you're super jumping or in the air, you get a splashdown. If you're on the ground, you get a reef slider. Slider doesn't activate in the air anyway, and splashdown is very natural to use there, so this is super easy and intuitive, and honestly will already help with synergy for a few weapons. For example, Dreadringer likes to jump a lot, and now it can do so without slowing down its special use. The added options already give a lot of flexibility for an overall power boost, with the execution of the special remaining simple. And so because of that, we can make a bit more targeted tweaks now. Let's start with Triple Splashdown changes first. I think both of its main issues of needing to be more punishing when it dies and being easier to counter at lower down can be fixed with one main idea I found from this video, which is if the splashdown user dies, the fists also die. This makes it so that the splashdown user needs to focus on keeping themselves safe, while of course still rewarding more creative placements of the fists over walls and ledges. Now if you're counterplaying the special and you take it out, you got that satisfying feeling back. In addition to that though, I think the HP of the fish should be lowered a bit. They're currently at 90, a little bit lower than a player health, but a lot of people might not even know that because it's very rare that that will actually matter. So instead I think we can drop it to 75. I want it to be higher than 70 because that will allow some weapons like Slosher to take it out too easily, but it's low enough here to where I think it'll be a little more noticeable that this is actually lower than a player health, and that way if you are in a situation where breaking the fist is the only way you can survive, it's a little easier to do that. To compensate for this though, super jumping with splashdown is gutted in this game for some reason. It's way worse than in Splatoon 2, and it should be fixed. And I also think that they could make the fists have a bit of an easier time clearing some walls, so that it's a bit easier to use these creative lineups that make the special so fun. And last but not least, we're gonna make the outside hit do 70 damage. This is mostly so that the damage number matches with Reef Slider, because otherwise that would be a little unintuitive, and it would keep its combos consistent. This is a lot of buffs, but at a lower end the special is undoubtedly weaker here, with the counterplay being a lot easier to do overall and forcing more emphasis on using the fists, which are, again, still easier to counter. The special just gets a little bit more reward for using it properly, which I think is totally fair. Reef Slider's a little harder to tweak. Now the obvious part is just the pain and outside damage radius need to be reduced by like 10 to 15%. Gets rid of zones cheese and makes the outside damage hitbox a lot easier to avoid. To compensate, I want to play into Slider being more of a repositioning tool, something that was nerfed in the last patch. Since this concept tones back the pain even more, I think it should be fair for it to travel about 10 to 15% further than it did before the nerf. This allows you to use Slider for positioning more, trying to stay alive or at least get a unique angle to pull attention, and that would give it a lot more utility. That's really about it though. The changes aren't crazy by any means, even if Triple Splashdown got quite a bit of them, and that's because the overall idea is still on the fact that you just have access to two of them at once. You can position in many different and unique ways that allow both of them to be an option the opponents have to consider, while at the same time the counterplay and overall, just overtuned stats can be toned down properly. It gives a special that's more unique, interesting, and has more skill expression while still being simple in execution and balancing it better across multiple levels of play. But hey, that's just my idea. Do you ever think we'll see a 2-in-1 special in Splatoon? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.